stream, but you don't get to see that, unfortunately. Yeah. It's not like Instagram Live.
Right. I feel like that's distracting though, even when you're watching people do it Instagram Live, they're like, oh, hello.
Like, hey, mom. Hey, friends. For anyone who is just joining us on the live stream, hi, hello. We're going to wait just a few minutes to let everybody log on before we get started.
I'm realizing now that there's like a Pennsylvania connection in the room. A lot of Pennsylvania. Got half the room.
I love when animals make appearances on Zoom calls. It's my favorite part of Zoom. And I don't have many favorite things about Zoom, but seeing people's pets is like my number one. That being said, Leo will definitely come charging in here through that door at some point. He gets like just really antsy if he doesn't get any attention for chunks of time.
And he knows that I'll yell.
Yeah.
Hi, Michelle. My friend Michelle just texted me that she sees me on the screen.
Probably gonna wait just one more minute before we get started. Welcome to everyone who's joining now.
We should have practiced like a wave.
Oh yeah, I don't know what order we're in. Is it the same on everyone's screen?
Probably not.
Yeah. There's not enough Zoom antics being had at any given time. It's all too serious.
Yeah, I do have one plant. I could have made something happen.
It's okay. She's ready. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi to everyone who is joining us. My name is Ari. I'm the Chief Curator at Union Hall. Tonight we're hosting a lovely group chat. Union Hall, I'm just going to give a little bit of background and then I'm going to kick it to Alli to talk a little bit about her background. Union Hall is a nonprofit arts exhibition space in Denver. We support diverse emerging artists while also acting as a multidisciplinary space for events. More of those coming whenever pesky COVID is over. But right now we're all digital, so thanks for joining us here on Zoom tonight. Our current show, Exclamation Point, which was curated by the lovely Alli Lemon, is the first show of Rough Gems 2021, Union Hall's annual curatorial open call and collaborative project. Rough Gems features three-week pop-up exhibitions from local emerging curators, which are chosen from the applications that we receive. This year, it's generously funded by the Bonfils Stanton Foundation and the Colorado Community Foundation. The show Exclamation Point, which Alli curated and all these lovely artists are a part of, explores play, joy, rigor, and what it means to make a painting in 2021. More deep dive on that later. There are 6 local and national artists in this exhibition who will all get a chance to introduce themselves shortly. Exclamation Point is open through Saturday, February 13th, and you can make a reservation on our website, which is www.unionhalldenver.org. I'm going to kick it to you, Alli.
Hi, my name is Alli Lemon. I'm a Boulder-based artist. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm pursuing an MFA in drawing and painting right now. I also run a residential art space called Maybe Blue. So Rough Gems was this great opportunity to get to really explore what it means to make a show that feels a little bit more professional, that has a little bit more weight behind it. And it was really exciting to work with work that is just so fun. So I'm gonna let the artists just introduce themselves really quickly. I guess I should call on you, Liz.
Thank you, Alli. I'm Liz Langaher. I'm a second-year MFA Arts Practices student at CU Boulder with Alli and Katie here. Yeah, did you want anything in specifically? Very happy to be here. Very happy to be in the show. It's a really wonderful work here.
And Liz's work is Miles and Miles and Miles and then the End, which is the featured purple wall, as well as the falling snow, which is sort of on the back wall, and as well as another cloud that's in our, what I like fondly call the Nimbly Pimbly Jamboree, which is our really fun wall that has multiple pieces on it. Marcella.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marcella. I'm also a Boulder-based artist pursuing an MFA at CU Boulder in the painting and drawing department. I'm originally from Philly. I'm pretty new to the scene there, so I'm happy to be showing so quickly after arriving. I'm just happy to be a part of this show.
Marcella's sitting in front of another one of her incredibly ambitious collages. She's the artist that made Longline, which is the large-scale collage of the ocean scene that's directly inside the space to the left. Satitra?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a Denver-based artist, though I've lived also in Philadelphia for over a decade and all over the East Coast and South America and Asia. But I am happy to be in this show, really excited, like I said, and my work, the work for the show is created with vintage saris.
And it's that beautiful work right in the front that draws you in as you're walking by. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie McColgan. I'm a second year MFA in ceramics at CU Boulder. So currently Boulder based, but originally from Boston.
Boston gal. And Jamie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Ernest. I am a Pittsburgh-based artist, really wishing I could be in Colorado right now to see this show in person and see all of your work in person and meet everyone in person, but virtual will have to do. I'm originally from Decatur, Alabama. So Alli, yay south, moving up north. And normally a painter, but for this show and the past year, I've been working with a lot of different materials.
Jamie is probably my favorite painter and has just recently started painting again. And I'm really excited to see what happens.
Me too.
All right, I'll throw it back to you, Ari.
Awesome. So I think just starting out, I'm going to give a little run of show for everybody who's joining us. Emma says there are 28 people right now and that the chat is lit. So keep the questions coming, you guys. Apparently there's a lot of engagement going on over there. We can't see it. So Emma's going to field your questions for us, but we'll be able to read it when we watch the live stream back. So thanks for all your engagement. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to start out just with a few questions for Alli about her curatorial practice, about things she's worked on in the past and things she's passionate about working on in the future. And then Alli's going to go ahead and ask some questions of artists, and then we'll take your Q&A at the end. So starting off with Alli, this is not your first curatorial rodeo. As you mentioned, you have been running Maybe Blue in Boulder, but you've also had some other experiences in the past doing curatorial work. So I just wanted to see if you could give us a little bit of background on when you first started curating, what attracted you to it, and how it's different or similar to your practice as an artist.
It's super different to my practice as an artist. My practice is really heavy and is very solitary. I feel I get a lot of energy from being in the studio, and I get a lot of energy from the things that I work on, but I'm definitely a social person. And so curatorial work gives me the ability to work with other people. I also just really like love art and geek out on art so much. So like getting to handle other people's work and see it in person and put it in context with other work I love is gives me a lot of satisfaction. So I started doing curatorial work at the Martha and Robert Fogelman Gallery of Contemporary Art in Memphis when I was still an undergrad, actually just after meeting Jamie in 2015 or 16, 2015 and 16. From there, I moved out to Colorado, fell in love with it, was mostly doing hair, which is my other sort of passion. I moved back to Memphis for a little while before coming to grad school and helped manage, found, and design the Rowdy department with a group of people in Memphis in the back of a store called Stock and Bell. So that was my first time getting to really like choose work. Unfortunately, I mostly like ended up designing the studio spaces because I left to go to grad school by the time the studio spaces were finished. But it was a great space because you got to work with art in conjecture with furniture and other homeware. So you really got to see work in interior spaces. And then I moved out here and I started Maybe Blue with my roommate, Emily Van Loan. And it's in my carport and my garage. And Katie and Liz have both shown there, and I'm very honored that they would show work in my garage. But that really got to satisfy the social part of my soul because it was mostly an art party. It was a pop-up, so if you missed it, it was gone. So it forced everyone to really like prioritize networking and art on one night a month.
Love that. I think that's like very much the spirit of where Rough Gems comes from too. You know, the shows are 3 weeks. They were 2 weeks last year, so they're super short, and it does kind of force people to come out and show their support while it's there. And then it's just been super fun having your work. I can't believe we're already like halfway through the show.
Me either.
That kind of segues to a good point, which is that Maybe Blue is not really doing anything right now due to COVID. Inviting people into your home space is really different than inviting them into a gallery, which is commercially cleaned, etc. So in your curatorial statement, you talk a little bit about how COVID inspired this show, sort of, or how, just not being able to see art for a really long time affected you and how that kind of played into the concept of the show. So also wondering if you can talk a little bit about how COVID has changed your practice as an artist, as a curator, all the things.
Yeah, I think as an artist, it's been really helpful because there's just a lot more time to work, if I'm being honest. And, I'm certainly not thankful for COVID, but I'm thankful for the amount of time I've been able to spend in my studio. But when it came to conceptualizing a show for Rough Gems, knowing that I wanted to apply, it was almost immediately, all I could think about was how I wanted to see a show that like gave me joy. And I'm surrounded by, half of the artists in this room are people whose work I get the honor of seeing at school, and they make work that has such intense rigor when it comes to material, but is so colorful and playful and curious. And so I was really inspired by their work as well as Amelia's. And it kind of just, I was like, okay, I have these people that I'm seeing. How do I bring them together? And as I was thinking about the work, I couldn't help but like exclaim a little bit about like how fun the show would be and how much I wanted other people to get that, to sort of have that moment of childlike wonder. I think that all of these works make us feel a little small maybe, or relate us to our bodies in a specific way. And I think when we're kids, it's just like you sit at the craft table and you pick up the yarn or like your mom's sweater that you're not supposed to color on, or you take all of these things and you make art objects with them when you're young. And I'm so inspired by the people in this room and the way that they have managed to bring that childlike wonder into their adult lives and into their arts practices. So yeah, I just thought we just need a beautiful, fun, wondrous show right now. We need to like feel some of that joy.
Absolutely. And that's totally the feedback that we've been getting from visitors as well. People are just like drawn into the space by the color, but then they stay for all the interesting materials and conversations that are happening within the work. Another thing that you say in the curatorial statement is this idea of what it means to make a painting in 2021 and how all of the artists in the show, are making paintings or wall works or at some point in their practice, even if not in the show. But that most of them don't work primarily with paint. And so I'd like to kind of hear your background on that concept. What is a painting? What isn't a painting? And where do you think painting is going? The big question.
I hope it's going really broadly out, as broad as the work in the show. I think that something that's really excited about being an artist right now or being a curator right now is that people are really exhausted by defining things in the limited terms of painting or of sculpture. And I think that what that does is free the artists to stop necessarily like forcing themselves into these boxes. And so the work in the show all has things that we attribute to the idea of painting. They hang on the wall. They're mostly flat to the wall, but they have life and they enter our space. And I think that really incredible traditional painting can do that. But I think that this work is exciting in the ways that it steps out of those boundaries. But yeah, and I hope that this can open up other people's eyes to the fact that painting isn't just paint on a canvas anymore, and that they can live with these kinds of objects in their spaces, and what kind of like wonder they can bring home day by day, as opposed to, we go to TJ Maxx and we buy a watercolor painting that looks nice to fill the walls. What does it mean when you live with a beautiful rug behind you, like Katie's handmade rug that's sitting behind her, or the collage that's behind Marcella? I think it just does something different and activates your space in your mind much differently than the art that we tend to buy for our homes on the fly.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. It's been a huge priority for me as I've kind of gotten farther into my career in the arts to try to support artists through, financially, like purchasing the work, not just like showing up to the show, liking the post, but actually like investing in their career by showing them that it's something that I want to live with and that I care about. And I know this is a conversation you and I have had a ton, even like during install, we were talking about it a bunch. But just interested in your thoughts about collecting and how to build collections with emerging and local artists, since I know it's something you're really passionate about.
I'm deeply passionate about it. I collect Jamie's work. I only can afford prints right now, but one day I'll get a painting, and I was lucky enough to purchase Bop, which is one of Amelia's smaller works in the show. For me, similar to what I was saying before, living with objects that are special, that have a meaning, that have a story, that help you define your tastes because you're going to carry them throughout the rest of your life, versus it's just something to fill the space. This is an object that you've invested in that holds a moment in time for you. I think living amongst those things is really important, not just to artists and not just to collectors, but I think to everybody, and recognizing that like art can be accessible, and that you can spend $75 on something to fill the wall from Target, or you can spend $150 on a print from an artist that you'll keep for the rest of your life. And you're supporting their journey and their dream, and you're part of the culture of your moment, versus just part of the, I hate to say the capitalist cycle of the moment, but part of that capitalist cycle of the moment, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of like, as we think about being conscious with our buying choices and like every other facet of our lives, which I know many of us are these days, that really comes into play too. And just like how your choices with what you're putting on your walls is just the same as what you're putting in your body, or what, et cetera. And I think people are starting to also come to the awareness. I think Instagram helps with this a lot, that like there is artwork at every price point, whether that's a print, whether that's like, doing a payment plan with an artist or a gallery and, doing $100 a month towards a piece that you really want to live with, that's an original. So yeah, I always enjoy having those conversations with you. Everyone out there in the chat, Alli is your girl if you want to talk about how to get a collection of emerging artists started. Not that I can't help you
Yeah.
with that either, but
Yeah. Holler at me. I don't take a commission. I'll point you in directions. I just want you to support my friends, and and live with really cool stuff in your house.
that's awesome. Well, I'm going to kick it back to you to ask some
Cool.
artist questions.
I'm excited. So a lot of the questions I have for the artists are really based on their material exploration, the actual physical objects in the show. So I'm gonna pick a question and maybe ask like 2 people to respond to it. But if you have a burning response that you really want to give, please hop in and I'll just let it kind of flow. So I'm gonna start with Marcella and Sachitra on how did you arrive at the materials you utilize? Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. I mean, is that a covert way of asking where I get all of my credit cards?
I would never do that.
So I guess I'll say that I don't draw any boundaries between my life and art. And so things from my life, just like everyday objects that come into my hands, end up naturally seeping their way into my art. So that's the first thing, is that there's no boundary there. Like everything is welcome. Everything is invited into my studio. I don't have rules about that. But I'm also realizing that maybe I have a problem with authority, which I should have known a long time ago, because my parents told me that every single day of my teenage years. So, and what I mean by that is when the hierarchy of artist materials comes up, I want to resist it. So, you know, when teachers in the past have said, you know, if you want to make a serious painting, you have to use oil paint, my response is, oh, really? You know, I want to challenge that thing. And so, for example, I'll go to puffy paint instead. I'll think, well, what's on the other end of the spectrum? What is like, you know, a cheap paint that is kind of coarse looking that you can just get at any craft store for a few dollars? I'll go to that. So it's also like, it's an act of resistance at the end of the day. And that also goes for like, not just, you know, artist materials and craft materials, but it also goes with like the everyday objects, like with credit cards, you know, they're sent to us in the mail or we get them at the bank and we're told you need to use these to buy things. And instead, I would rather just cut them up and make art out of them. Or, you know, I've used like pills in my artwork. So instead of taking them as prescribed, they go into the art. So yeah, at the end of the day, for me, it's about resisting hierarchy and acts of resistance.
I love that. That's beautiful. Sachitra, same question.
Yes, so the materials in the work that I have in the exhibition, you know, I mentioned are made with vintage saris, but I use a lot of different materials in my work. So like Marcella, I don't have boundaries on the materials that I use. So they're often found objects, they're objects, you know, just from everyday life as well. I started using the vintage saris a few years ago. I created a large scale installation for the Sharjah Biennial and wanted to use a material that spoke of, I'm from the South Asian diaspora, and I wanted to sort of unite women over topography and over time that were also from the diaspora. So a lot of my work deals with migration and displacement and diaspora. And so the saris became a really important aspect of my work. And I found that they have found their way into my work in various ways. So as a sculptural material, they're all vintage and they come from different parts of the world. So initially when I was collecting the saris, I got them from my mother, from her friends, from my family, from India, and also from the Middle East. And so I have a lot of different saris. I mostly source them from India, now, but they're all vintage, all of different ages, you know, and you can kind of feel the crispness or the softness. And sometimes you can smell the perfumes, and there's so much of the body that's in them. And so when I weave them, I remember when I first started weaving them, I really felt kind of connected to these people. It was so interesting. And I feel that way with a lot of the objects I use. So because they're vintage, they're found, and they're often handmade. And so whether, you know, if I'm using a found needlepoint or a found embroidery, I think of my work as a collaboration with those original makers, a one-sided collaboration in a way. But I think, you know, I think of my work in that way. And there is that sort of anti-capitalist, you know, hierarchy aspect of my work as well that I share with you.
I want to just ask a quick follow-up question to that that's been burning for me. Do you have just sort of like a stockpile that you're pulling from to cut up? Do you do you find enough to make, for instance, tethered, or like do you just have the backlog? Like, kind of how does that process work of getting them?
Yeah, it's, you know, I have in my studio a contraption that a friend of mine made for me where I can weave. You know, I consider it's not really weaving, but you know, it's my own interpretation of weaving. The saris nowadays, I combine them sometimes with other fabric, but I source them mostly through India now. I'm kind of going through still the ones from my friends and family, but those, you know, will dwindle over time for sure. So yeah, they're mostly, I do have a stockpile. Yes. Cool. Yeah. I'm not a hoarder, but I have a stockpile of saris. Yes.
I
and a lot of other stuff in my studio too.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think most artists are hoarders.
Yeah.
We like see something and we're like, I could probably use that one day. And so I want to actually take the same question and kind of throw it at Jamie, because Jamie, you've really changed your materials in the last couple of years. And now you're working with things that I don't even understand what they are half the time. So how did you come to make these new works?
Girl, I don't even understand what they are half the time. Yeah, I was a painter for a long time, working with oil paint and a little bit of like mixed media collage in my oil paint. But I got bored with painting. It just became not exciting anymore. I felt like I could wake up and paint with my eyes closed. So I wanted to try something different. And I did a residency at Vermont Studio Center, and I embraced like this, okay, anything but painting. That's what we're going to do. So I just started playing with all sorts of materials, from fabric and dyes to flocking, a lot of mold making and casting. And that kind of led up to the work that is in this show that was created like spring, summer of 2020 for a different show that ended up in this very amazing show I'm very excited about. But all of the works in this show kind of symbolize like food serving platters. So my work is a lot about Southern hospitality and like how I grew up and like examining the contrasts of altruism and polarization within the South, especially within the idea of Southern hospitality. So using these things so one of my pieces has these look like plasticky looking collard greens type thing, but it's actually made of paint squeezed through a frosting tube that I made to look like greens. So like I'm trying to take these objects and these materials and make them almost emulate the ideas of like domesticity and food at the same time. So I've also always been like a toucher and a feeler. I am like highly encouraging everybody to touch my paintings if you ever see them in person. I know curators will kill me for that, but I think that also kind of leads into the materials that I used with the flocking and a lot of the fabric stuff. So like the needlepoint embroidery on one of the pieces, the Aliens Ain't Real piece. Grow up, I'm praying for you.
Aliens are
so
real.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised at this point. But
I felt a little lucky to get to touch that piece, by the way, because it really is so great. Like the materials are so, so great. And yeah, I am also a person who loves to touch things, and it was so cool to see all of your materials up that close.
Yeah, so I think that's a big reason I chose those materials, is me touching and feeling my way through how to symbolize these weird domestic ideas that I'm playing with.
I love that, and I'll pivot it to kind of the second question I have written down that I'm going to throw to Katie and Liz. I'm going to go to Katie first because she's another person that likes to touch things and is a very tactile maker. So Katie and Liz, I'm curious, how much of your work is planned ahead of time and how much of it is made, is figured out through the making?
I'd say probably half and half for me. Sometimes it's a little more planned, sometimes it's a little more intuitive, but I have like 30 pages of like notes that I keep kind of expanding and decreasing as I check kind of ideas off of it. So sometimes I'm more inclined to follow a plan that I've set in stone, and as I'm executing the plan, I never really like follow every step. There's kind of like the finishing touches sort of come more intuitively, like a little bling, a little sprinkles here, kind of like this intuitive care for the work. And so that's not like as incorporated into the planning, but some things I just like have a vision for and I run with that sort of vision and plan. So yeah, I guess sort of half and half.
Love that. And Liz?
Yeah, I have to agree. I often have a vision of something that I want to make. Like I know where the end product is. I know what it should look like. But as for how to translate like a 2x3 pastel drawing into a ceramic work with extra additives is always a surprise to me. I feel like I make work and I just work with hope that it'll work out and that everything can come together. And everything really comes together in the last hour of the pieces. For instance, the ginkgo leaf, the 2 a.m. voicemail, was really making the core, making the additives, all of those ginkgo leaves. I probably made 200 or 300. And then making the netting and then just hoping that everything would come together and stay put when I put it on the wall. So really a lot of it is like sweat and like a little bit of planning of knowing where I want to go. But I try to let the work move itself as much as possible to keep it fresh.
Something that I'm thinking about that isn't a question I had planned to ask, but I think it's a really quick, easy answer that I'd love to hear from all of you about is, do you feel that you are somebody that tends to make and then think about it later and try and figure out what you were thinking about as you were making the piece and put it in context with your work? Or do you like to plan, like, are you a thinker than a maker? Is there a balance between those two? I always remember there was a professor that said some people make and then think, some people think and then make. And I'm always curious where people fall in that camp. So Chitra, what do you think?
So I would say I have an overarching thought, right? Like, or an overarching thesis. But when I make, it's very frenetic.
Yeah.
So a material might inspire me and then I allow it to take me to a place. So there's a lot of experimentation in my work. And I don't really know always exactly, I might have a vision of one part of the work, but then it develops into other things.
Yeah. Liz?
I think I have a tendency to think and then make and then come back much later and find out that I was doing something very different. I think it's a development always from what I think I'm doing and what I'm actually doing.
Relatable. Same. I'm not going to answer. I'm just going to say Liz's answer is my answer as well. Katie?
Kind of all jumbled together, I think. Like, I think I come into the studio a lot and like sit with work that's already in progress, and I'm like thinking about it. But while I'm like actually making decisions in the work, I'm not usually thinking. So it's kind of like bookended by thinking and rethinking. But again, like Liz, like coming back to something even like years later, and you like make these connections and you're like, oh, I really was thinking about this other thing. And yeah.
Marcella, if you don't say plan and then make, I'm going to be shocked.
I was actually going to say the same thing as everyone else. It's think, make, think. I definitely have like some kind of agenda going in, but like Liz was saying before, I like to relinquish control. Like I like to let the work do what it's going to do. And so it does. And then that's where the thinking comes again afterwards. I like think about what the work did, not what I did, if that makes sense.
And Jamie.
I think I'm pretty much in the same boat with Marcella too. You know, I always have a concept, and the motivation for what I'm going to create is normally there first, but how it becomes visualized is often like a rocky road, and thinking comes in between that. And then, yeah, revisiting pieces later and realizing connections that you didn't even know were there is kind of refreshing sometimes. So it is fun to look back on work.
Jamie, I'll just stick with you. So I know you're kind of dabbling back into painting, but are there any other materials that you're working with right now that you're excited about, or can you kind of talk to me about where your practice is at right now?
Yeah, it's kind of like a bag of trail mix right now. And I'm not getting any M&Ms at the moment. But I have been working a little bit with rug hooking and like yarn type work, similar to Katie's. And I also recently did this aluminum casting with a friend of mine who works at a college. So I kind of got sneaky access to do that. So I did like an aluminum cast of a weird painting, like a relief painting that I did. Let's see. I've also tried my hand at felting. A lot of it has kind of more shifted since those sculptures shifted towards the textiles, because it's kind of sort of how I grew up, like learning a lot of fiber arts from my grandparents. And then just being in the South in general, fiber arts and crafts are everywhere. You know that, Alli, you know. So I think that's kind of where I've been gravitating towards. But I did recently start painting a little bit again. So we'll see how it goes as I'm working on like 15 different things and painting. Maybe I'll break up with painting again and leave it for aluminum casting. I don't know.
My little heart can't take that again. I think everyone in here, I think, is really interested in fibers. Katie, as you mentioned, is also doing rugs. Liz is doing weavings. Marcella is quilting, as we all know. And Suchitra is weaving, sorry. So I think it's interesting that everyone at least has some sort of a side hustle in fibers. Marcella, what are you working on?
I'm still making quilts. I started making quilts in September, and I'm on quilt number 5 now. So I'm cranking them out. They're gradually getting larger and more complicated.
And more glow in the dark.
And more glow in the dark, yeah. And I was going to say my latest material is glow in the dark thread. I really like this idea of having a hidden in plain sight material. You know, something you would never suspect that this white thread actually makes like this glow in the dark zigzaggy line in the dark. So that's what I'm playing with right now.
Liz?
I actually think that this show is a good representation of all of the things that I have in my pocket. I do have a weaving practice. It comes in and out of my work depending on where it needs to be. I think I found this kind of woven road thing that I'm very interested in exploring in the future. Other than that, other than, you know, my intense love of ceramic, I have this netting practice now, which is a surprise to me. I've never really fished in my life, but I've been making these nets pretty obsessively. Yeah, I think for me, this is like a really holistic view of everything I have in my repertoire
And poetry, which we,
and poetry.
yeah. Yeah. Liz is a fantastic poet. If you haven't been able to read the poems that go with the works, I believe they're on the website. If not, I'll ask Jess to put them on the website, but the poems that go with her work are really beautiful. Katie and then Sachitra.
I always try and have something kind of experimental going in the studio. I think that kind of feeds my practice and like propels it in new directions. So like you said, I have been tufting rugs, which aren't in the show, but the scraps of them are. And then I make like other ceramic things that aren't scraps like in the show. But the scraps from the show are also from those things. So yeah, I guess all like my experimental stuff kind of like feeds into one another. I paint gouache paintings of stickers and sticker sheets, and that's kind of like moving in different directions. I use the scraps from those too to make pet rocks. Everything's kind of like a recycling process, giving new life to old scraps.
I don't want to put Katie on the spot, but she also makes cards, painted cards that are, and a binder. She hand sewed a binder, grommeted it. These cards are beautifully cut on Bristol board using the laser cutter. So they've got a gorgeous texture to them. And then they're housed in this really perfectly made binder that was made specifically for them, which is like a really, I think, exciting thing that you've done recently. I get the pleasure of seeing going into Katie's studio is really like a toy store. Like you never know like what exciting new thing is going to be in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Sachitra.
So there are a couple projects going on. So I'm reclaiming a very large scale tapestry, European tapestry with embroidery and beading and whatnot. And then last week, someone smashed the windows, two of the windows in my studio, but they were double paned. And so the glass, I'm using the glass to create a sculpture in combination with this old kind of antique Indian sculpture that I got 20 years ago in India. So I'm combining the found glass with that sculpture.
That is super exciting. I can't wait to see that. I hope that you're not getting cut by the glass. The other thing I would say, you just recently posted a new piece of work that you did with a lenticular print, and something I really get excited about in your work is the combination of these high-low materials. Sometimes you're using what seem to be these like really precious found objects, and then sometimes it's like the kind of found object that, you know, we pass by in a gas station, and I think you combine them also beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So the last question I have for you guys is, do you have questions for each other? Does anyone have a weird material question for somebody else, or just anything?
Part I'm most excited about. I just want to see you all interact.
Yeah, you guys just talk. See ya.
I have two questions for Marcella. One, how are your hands, and how do you still have hands after? Like, I imagine your practice to be very X-Acto knife and credit card based, and it makes my hands hurt.
The secret is investing in industrial strength scissors. I shit you not, that is what I do, and it makes my life a lot easier. When I first started working with credit cards, I was actually making jewelry out of them, and I was using like these like old kitchen scissors. And then I went online and bought a nice pair, and it was like cutting through butter. It was so much easier. But thank you for your concern.
I imagine those to be like the big ribbon cutting shears at like openings of things. That's how I picture you with the credit cards and a big pair of scissors.
Well, I have a question for the group. I'm wondering, what is your dream material? if you could work in any material, spare no expense, money is no object, what would you work in? And a follow-up question to that is, what materials do you see on the horizon, maybe?
I think I would work with like industrial felt. You can get like enormously thick pieces of felt. They're so expensive, but they're luscious and soft looking. It's something that I have thought about in the past. If I like didn't have a budget or anything, I think I would go for like huge pieces of like perfectly dyed like yellow felt. That would be nice.
I would really want to use like glass. I really want to make glass charms, like some flame work stuff, like precious metals and precious stones. I just want to make charms basically. But I think that's like going away from what I think is going to be sort of more utilized. I think less or more accessible materials will be on the horizon, continue to pop up, which is why I don't use glass or precious metals and precious stones, but dreams.
I think I would love to have the skill to know how to use like a loom to make massive blankets. I don't know how to even begin doing that, but that is a dream of mine. Ow, my cat is biting my foot. Sorry, guys.
Step one is to buy some super old loom off of a lady in her garage and show up with a truck to get it. You'll figure it out. You just need to find one first.
Okay.
I think for me, I've been interested for a long time in combining technology with the fiber. And so I've started using screens with my weavings. And so if I could make like 100-foot weaving with like multiple screens of videos of landscapes and whatnot, that would be a dream. Yeah.
That would be amazing. It makes me think about that David Hockney exhibition like a handful of years ago. I can't think of when that was. I want to answer this question just as an artist myself, and Marcella this week has made me really fall in love with holographic charms. She has this incredibly strange holographic necklace, and all I want to do is make drawings that are then like perfect holographic jewelry.
Yeah,
I wish I had an answer to this question too, but I'm not an artist. So I just wish I had the like creativity and follow through that you guys do. I'm just too much of a logistics nerd.
Marcella, what's yours?
my answer is also holograms. Because they're so expensive, like legit
They're so expensive.
large size holograms. They're really expensive. But I have another one on top of that. It's called BioRock. It's a material that accelerates the growth of corals. I really want to make underwater art someday. And at the same time, like, you know, help to restore the environment. And so someday I want to work in BioRock.
All right, if anyone doesn't have any last questions for the group, I'll pass it back to Ari.
I was curious about COVID times and how that sort of affected everyone's practice. You know, it seems like a lot of what you guys make, you make as hermits in a certain way, right? You're in your studio kind of working, and I'm curious how you know the pandemic has changed your practice.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Alli was saying earlier, where you have so much time because of COVID, and I felt like I had just broken up with painting shortly before COVID, and you know, it's really scary to jump into materials and processes that you know nothing about and that you have no confidence in. And I do feel like COVID kind of gave me the time because all of my upcoming painting shows had been canceled. So I had all of this time to really experiment and try all of this stuff. So I'm grateful for that. But I had to work out of my apartment a little bit because our studio building got closed. And I also moved studios twice during COVID, which was not fun. But I am grateful for, being able to clear my calendar and just, do anything. Honestly, kind of gave me a weird freedom.
Yeah, also piggybacking off of what Jamie just said, and then Alli, what you said earlier, like I'm not thankful for COVID, but like thankful for the time. And I am too, like changed my whole studio practice. I wake up early now, which is interesting. And yeah, it's just like made me fully lean into my studio practice. It also has like shaped the directions I've had to go because of like losing access to our beautiful facility. So no ceramics. I've like leaned more into painting and like whatever scraps I took from the studio. So I feel like the work I'm making now has definitely been shaped by the initial quarantine period of like being stuck in the home. But yeah, I guess it's also just, it's really made me like love my studio practice and all my things much more. It's like what gets me out of bed, like out of my head. And I don't know, I don't know, thankful for a lot of things that have happened in my studio practice, but not the entire period.
I think it's given me a better at-home practice, actually. It's forced me to go home a little bit more often than I normally would have. In a normal studio environment that we have, thankfully, at CU Boulder, you could stay there the entire day, take all of your meals communally. Like you could go at 9 a.m. and leave at 9 p.m. And now I have such a desire to just go home and settle down and like read something or take a break, which I think is what COVID times has really given me, is like the chance to take a break. And then like come back to the studio like much faster and with much more vigor and desire to be there, I think. We had like an enforced 6 months absence from the studio, and that was really hard. But when we got back, I think I enjoyed it so much more and wanted to be there much harder than ever before. So I guess it just like made me reconsider like how I valued what I had around me.
Yeah, for me, honestly, COVID didn't really affect my studio practice at all because I work alone in a room. What's actually disrupted it the most is starting graduate school. Graduate school has completely blown up my studio practice. This is the first time I've ever had a studio that wasn't in my own home. So this takes a lot of getting used to. And so far, I'm not being very graceful about it. I feel like I'm really struggling with it. So yeah, COVID was nothing compared to graduate school.
We try and lessen the load as much as we can. All right, is it Q&A time, Ari?
I actually have sort of a good follow-up to that last question, which is coming from the chat. So final call, anybody out there who wants to submit a question to the chat. But there's one here. It says, I'm curious what the artist learned about how to make work that is mainly viewed online. And though, Union Hall is open to see this exhibition in person, there's also artists that are out of state. There's also just, a lot more sort of safety precautions that people are taking right now. So yeah, have you been in other exhibitions that were online only? Have you made social media more of a part of your practice? I think that's a super cool question because we've all definitely had to adjust to things being more online this year.
I would say for myself, oh, go ahead, Liz.
I mean, I was going to say that I think this is like a perpetual problem or maybe an opportunity that we've been working with since social media really became online and a part of our artist lives. I'm a young person, so I don't really know about that, but I think everything you make, and you have to understand that it will be an image in the end. No matter how wonderful its physicality is, the life after you make it and show it, unless you can keep it in a storage unit forever, is an image, is a 2D image that has to be viewed on a computer or on a phone. So I think for me, it has led me to think, how do I make an image with 3D materials? How can this be as emphasized as possible? What is dramatic and how can I make it more dramatic? Are things that I think about.
I just, a short statement because me and Liz we're on the same page. I think that what's really important for artists, curators, anyone at this point is that like we're recognizing that the image is the thing, and that like everything is everything can be put online and may have to be put online again in the future. And it's kind of been that way for a while, but I think that it's like forced a lot of us to up our game as far as like how we take images casually, and just in general, like how our work functions in a 2D space, whether it's 2D or not.
Yeah, I feel like it's been really nice in terms of like social media and just like taking pictures of the sort of like in-betweens or just like studio moments that would usually be seen by someone popping in, because like being in the shared building. And so that's lacking, that like social aspect. So I get that like social aspect of still sharing like art processes and like being connected through social media in that. But I don't know, I am so in love with the object that I know that it lives on as an image forever, but I don't know, I miss seeing things in real life. I miss it. It's made me miss it so much, like seeing art, seeing objects, going places, nouns.
Nouns.
I miss nouns.
Yeah, for me, it's an afterthought. I just don't consider it when I'm making my work. It comes at the very, very end of the whole process, you know, the photographing it and the putting it on social media and putting it online. It's just not something I consider at all. And, you know, it's tough because then I'm stuck with trying to photograph this thing that's impossible to photograph. And it just doesn't, you know, we were talking about this earlier, like holograms, for example, really hard to photograph. They don't come through. You just have to see the work in person, and there's really no way around it. And on top of that, I'll say like, there's another thing with scale that happens, right? Like I just finished making this 8x8 foot quilt, and I'm like having this inner conflict about like, should I put this on Instagram? Because it feels like a betrayal to like spend so much time on this giant thing and then like to put it, you know, make it this size on somebody's screen. So yeah, it's something that I struggle with, but I still don't like allow it to actually shape the work or the decisions I make.
Your work was so challenging for me to like get my head around. Just seeing it on a PDF and seeing it in person was just like a completely different experience. And some of your work are some of my favorite pieces in the show, but like an image this big does just not deal with the enormity of what it is that you're doing, especially when it comes to like labor and materials. It's just really hard to get it across. So I imagine it's definitely more of a struggle for you these days. And I mean, I know we're all dealing with that in some way or another, but you're so right. Like it just isn't part of what you're doing. So it feels like a complete afterthought to try to force it to be this big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't translate. This is where details come in.
Detail shots, yes.
For me, I think I've learned to adapt, right, to the digital ream. But I really miss the experiential, and I feel like my work is experiential. I mean, as most of all of your work is, but you know, given the times we've had to deal, I haven't participated in any online shows, but I did have a solo last summer, and you know, it is disappointing to have an installation and have it be this big on a screen, you know. But you know, it hasn't changed the way I think about my work or the way I make my work, and this too shall pass. So that's how I think.
I think I'm with Marcella. It kind of comes as an afterthought, and I don't want, this isn't the place to start this argument, but I feel like there's a lot of things that look good on Instagram that are not actually great. So we're not starting this. This isn't the time for that. That's all I have to say about that.
I don't think you got an argument. You got a lot of head nods is what you got.
It's, yeah.
I was reading an article earlier this week about how like a lot of artwork these days is sort of made for that like endless scroll feature, where it's not necessarily about the like labor, the craftsmanship, the ideas. It's about like how quickly can you see the image and get your mind around it. And it's like a very shallow way to consume really anything, but it's a product of like just how much of our time is spent on our phones, and how we are so used to going through those images so quickly, and like you get like a little hit of dopamine and then you just keep going. And you're totally right. It's just, yeah, I don't think it's an argument. I think it's just everyone's probably in agreement that they've seen something online and then seen it in person and been totally disappointed, or yeah, it is a frustrating aspect of the digital world these days.
I'm really thankful for this show, and that like obviously that it is in person and that people can see how fantastic these objects are in real life. But I'm also really grateful to you guys for making work that looks incredible as images as well. It really, I mean, really, when I see the install shots of Exclamation Point, I'm just like, that work on those walls really, really, it feels like I like got to play with like stickers. Like I feel like it was just so fun.
I have a couple other ones in the chat. I'm just sorting through because many of them have sort of been answered already. So I just don't want to double up. I have one for Marcella. Can you talk a little bit about the cyanotype quilt with the fish and the women? And yeah, just a little more about the materials and concept behind that one.
Sure, the fish bras. You can't make this shit up.
It really resonates with me being from Florida, because I like have seen those images from everyone I went to high school with. So
yeah, I was stunned to find them. For anybody who hasn't seen that quilt, it's a fish bras quilt. And to briefly explain what fish bras are, it is when a topless woman holds a dead or dying fish, or more than one fish, in front of her bare breasts and poses for the camera, and then posts it online with the hashtag fish bras, which is how I found it. So all of those images in that quilt are screenshots from Instagram. I was just bewildered and floored by how many of them there are. There are thousands of them. And there are many Instagram accounts dedicated just to those images. But I started using, well, I continued using this device that I'd been using in some other work, actually the one behind me, which is these fish cutouts, these fish silhouettes, using the idea of absence as a form of mark making. So for people who haven't seen the work, every fish that's depicted in those Instagram photos, it turns into a blue silhouette because they're all made from cyanotypes. And I guess I just wanted to kind of emphasize the objecthood of those sentient beings. You know, they're turned into a prop for kind of a funny photo, but if you sit there and think about it for too long, it becomes kind of heartbreaking and like deeply fucked up, which I think is what attracted me to those images. And then, you know, I had been using cyanotypes for a little while, and I like to use them to talk about the ocean I mean, to start with, like simply because of their colors, because of all those beautiful, different, rich blues. It just gets right down to the heart of the matter when I use cyanotype.
That piece is definitely one of my favorites in the show. I love the backstory. Fish bras are just a cultural phenomenon that people need to know more about. And I totally agree with you. It's actually really disturbing if you think about it for too long. I have 2 more questions. One is for Alli and one is sort of for the group. For Alli, we talked a little bit about your curatorial background, but I also want to ask, how did you select the artists that are in the exhibition? And then how did you go about selecting their work? This is like a little more of a bring it back to curatorial, but I'm just interested.
So I think I mentioned in the essay for the show and earlier today, obviously I'm surrounded by several of the artists here, but Amelia Briggs's MFA show was, she was getting her MFA when I was getting my BFA. And I remember seeing that show, and it still to this day is one of the most dynamic, colorful shows I've ever seen. She painted half the wall from here down, like pink, part was black, part was green. It was, everything about it was so cared for. And so in selecting these artists, I just like wanted to find people that also gave me that feeling. So I knew like kind of initially I wanted to bring Amelia's work to Denver, and it kind of has been happening organically in the back of my mind for a long time. But with choosing the specific pieces, it was, of course, availability came into it, but for Jamie's, I really knew like which 2 I wanted. And luckily they are both collected and the collectors were willing to let us show them. So Chitra was like kind enough to like make a piece that like was for the space. Katie also made her work for the show. And, you know, obviously these are like artists whose work I admire so much. It was just a really easy sort of like leap of faith and trust for me. And I got to like go to the Exclamation Point when I saw the work for the first time. I walked in after Suchitra's piece had been installed, and it was just sort of like I mean, it was art Christmas, which is my favorite kind of Christmas. And yeah, with Liz and Marcella, it shocks me to no end that Longline hasn't been shown wildly and broadly since it was made. So I feel really honored to have been early on in showing it, because I'm sure it will get plenty of attention now. And Liz's work is like fairly a new way of working for her. Like you've made the large clouds, but the roads, the nets, kind of the more installation feel was something that I was really struck by and excited when I saw that work hung up in at the university. So yeah, it's kind of all pretty organic.
It's funny because like when we first started working together on this exhibition, I didn't know you super well. We had done a studio visit way back when, but I knew your work. And then seeing the proposal, I was like, whoa, this is completely not like her work. Because a lot of the time, like a great example would be Robert Martin, who's a good friend of yours and who guest curated one of the Rough Gem shows last year. Their work is also not really related to the show. And or the show that they curated. And I was so surprised by that. And the same thing happened with you, where it was like, the works in the show don't on the surface seem like your aesthetic based on your work as an artist, but then getting to know you over the process of creating all this, I was like, oh, this is exactly who Alli is actually. Like your sense of humor and everything just comes through so well in the selections that you made, but also like the really thoughtful nature that's under all of that, like, you know, blending all these different stories that are coming together, whether that's like Marcella's sea life expedition and talking about fishing, commercial fishing, and whether that's Suchitra talking about her culture and her family in a really beautiful way. It's just cool that there's all of these underlying things, while at the same time it's this like rainbow explosion festival, mimbly pimbly, all of it. It's you.
Yeah, that's how
all your hard work. I think everyone here can agree in saying that they have enjoyed working with you. It's been so fun.
It was mostly, can I say one thing really quickly? The best thing for me is I got to make a punctuation, like I got to make a pun about punctuation, and that has been honestly the greatest joy of my life. So I really thank you all for giving me that opportunity.
It's very on brand for you.
Thank you.
And, just to wrap up, I think it would be great if you could talk about any upcoming projects. Where can we find you in the future? What's going on with Maybe Blue? What can we expect, even if the answer is nothing for now? And same for everybody else. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about what you're working on, if you have any shows coming up, if you have any other projects you want to plug. This is a great time for that.
Yeah, for me, Maybe Blue is a little bit on hold, but it's looking like I am going to be living in that house next year. So hopefully Maybe Blue will be back for my last year in Boulder, even if I'm just moving up to Denver. I doubt I'll ever have a more perfect space to do a residential space. So hopefully Maybe Blue will be back next year. Come the summer, we'll see how it goes. And then other than that, yeah, I'm just making work in the studio. That's it. Somebody else go. Jamie, what you doing?
I have nothing coming up that I can remember at the moment. Yeah, nothing's coming to mind. Just making work in the studio. Come, check it out virtually, I guess.
Come
Looking forward
visit
to it.
Colorado when you can.
I know, I was supposed to.
All of these artists' contact information, like their Instagram and websites, are on the Union Hall website under the Exclamation Point page. So if you are interested in checking out anyone's work further or setting up a studio visit, for example, yeah, you can find that information on our website. I would love if this talk turned into some studio visits for you guys.
I would love if this was a studio visit group.
Noted. I also will be toiling away in my studio, and for those who are around CU Boulder, I'm going to have a mini exhibition in mid-April for my first year review. So in a couple rooms down. So come take a peek. We'll do a little studio visit, and I will also, of course, share some photos of that online.
I'm also going to be toiling away, like Marcella said. I like that word. I'm going to use it. Working towards critiques. I'm sending a little piece out to Philly for the Clay Studio Small Favors show. I'm really excited about that. Alli, actually, that piece you really liked, the little square gray one. So yeah, that's all I got on this horizon.
Like everyone else, just working as much as possible. I have a kiln load of ceramic work going in this Saturday, so fingers crossed for me. Other than that, yeah, I'm on Instagram. I have a website. Feel free to reach out.
I have some things coming up this year that surprised me, only because it's a ridiculously difficult time. But I have a group exhibition opening in New York in a couple of weeks with an artist I admire. So I'm excited about that. And then I have some museum exhibitions coming up later this year, including a solo. So I'm excited about that.
So great. Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm sure all the grads in the group could probably use a little bit of, mentorship or coaching on how to get from that point. So we appreciate you being part of this, and maybe some of your fellow showmates might reach out at some point.
Anytime. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. Teacher is also the visiting artist at CU Boulder next week and giving a lecture. If you want to learn more about her work specifically.
Is that open to the public? Like, is there a link that somebody out of town? Cool. I'll check. I'm sure I probably got it in an email or something, but maybe we can post that on Union Hall's story.
It's probably on the CU Art and Art History website for anyone else who's tuned into this.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll try to put that out there. That would be great to be able to plug that. I feel like there's so many gems of wisdom that you probably have to share.
Well, I really look forward to the talk, and I enjoyed being part of this exhibition. I would love to share anything that could be of use.
Well, I just want to say thank you again to all of you. It has been such a pleasure working with you and getting to spend some time around your work and getting to know more about your practice. And I know that, you know, the folks who have come and seen the show in person have just so enjoyed all of the bright and colorful and shiny and beautiful and interesting and deep things going on in all of your practices. So thank you all again. And thank you to Alli for all of your hard work in putting this together. You are one of my favorite curators in town, and I know that you will go on to do, beyond your work, you'll go on to do more and more interesting combinations of artists that you admire, and I think that's so cool. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this live stream, and this will also be available, you know, on our YouTube channel and on our website. So if you love this and somebody you know missed it, feel free to share that link with them. You can also stay tuned for more updates on Union Hall by following us on Instagram at Union Hall Denver. You can also go to our website for more information on the show. We have 2 more shows coming up as part of Rough Gems that are also 3-week pop-ups. The next one is opening in mid-February. I forget the exact date, but you can go to our calendar, www.unionhalldenver.org. You can find all that information there. We are so excited to share those exhibitions with you. And Exclamation Point closes next Saturday, which is the 19th. Is that correct? I think so. No, 20th.
No, it's the 13th.
It's the 13th? I don't
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm like 3 weeks ahead.
But it is next Saturday.
It's the 13th. Exclamation Point closes the 13th. Sorry that I'm just a mess on dates tonight.
Okay.
Thank you all again for being here. It was so great. Have a lovely evening, and we hope to see you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Good to see you all.